All right, here we go. It might rain. I might have to jump up and shut the door to the shop here. So if that happens, uh, let's see. We are rolling into Friday Night Live with the most minimal of preparation right now because it's spring and everything is happening all at once. And I'm trying really hard to live in the moment and enjoy this time of year. And I think these past several days I've done better at that than I have been, a little less frantic and frenzied. So I got quick notes, but yeah, we're just gonna hit a bunch of points here. So, oh, here comes the sunshine. It's been rain, sun, rain, sun. So it's swampy. I'm sweaty. I'm sticking to everything, and it's that I think that's going to be a thing for the next several days. So, oh, let's see what we got here. The housekeeping, two foraging classes coming up, and a third is in the works. But it won't be here on the farm. It will probably be in Strawberry Plains, Tennessee, a little bit east of Knoxville. When Allie and I get the details pulled together on that, you guys will know about it. But in the meantime, we've got foraging classes here at Bluebird Hill in Knox County. May 11th, that's a Saturday. May 26th, that's a Sunday. We're going to go from about noon to 3. We will walk the property at a leisurely pace. I'm going to show what's going on out here. We're going to talk about harvesting. And as always, for the vast majority of everything we find, I always allow people to collect seed. If that's the case, take some cuttings, dig a few things up. Pretty much everything we have out here is cool to propagate. I kind of leave things for that purpose. Or if it's something that we can't propagate right away, let me know and I'll make it happen later. I like to share the abundance in that way. Um, we've got those two classes, and then Sunday, June 2nd, that'll be the first Sunday in June. That's going to be our next open house here as well. We do that from about noon to 4. I will give a tour of the homestead, our cabin, our systems, answer questions. We always do a little bit of bartering. Good opportunity to come out here and network with other people who share your interests, and more details, directions, all that good stuff. Strongrootsresources@gmail.com. Holler at me. Tell me what you heard about, and I'll get you all the info that you need. Okay, so I'm happy about poop. I'm really happy and really excited about the amount of poop that is occurring on this homestead now. So between the addition of the rabbits and the chickens, I feel like I'm starting to really hit my stride with the composting, a quicker version of it than kind of the static version we do for everything else around here, and getting that compost made and applied to where I feel it is needed the most. In this case, that's going to be the pastures. So let's see how I want to lay this out. As I've mentioned before, a lot of the fields out here, well, all of it went fallow in the mid to late 90s. Certain areas were kept bush hogged a time or two a year. Nothing was hayed, which in a way is good because haying actually takes all nutrient, exports it all off the property, and nothing's really returned. At least, we might have our first interesting person in the chat. At least the whole, how shall I put this? When you're bush hogging, at least you're returning that cut grass, that biomass back to the field. If you guys will allow me to pause just a second. That doesn't look legit. I'm going to boot that person. I am almost certain that nobody in who is joining this chat is into Japanese anime that requires, or I should say has characters with no clothes on. If that's your thing, maybe they signed in from the wrong account. I don't know. Maybe you've got your burner account for that kind of stuff, and you got your homestead account on the other side. But anywho, let's see. We've got fields that need help. We've got fields that have a lot of bare spots. We have, there's just areas where there's been vehicles driven over them, just things like that. And that's what we have to, that's one of the many things that have to be addressed out here. So in these areas that have been bush hogged, we've got kind of a combination of a compaction issue, some barren spots, and I'm kind of talking about places for the most part. They're like the size of a saucer, of like a teacup saucer. Um, Magdalena is joined us. She's one of the folks I'm consulting with here in Knox County. So thank you for stopping in. And this is always a Q&A session as well. So people are always welcome to kind of interrupt my train of thought. I'll star questions and we'll get them addressed as well. So, we've got these patches of ground that are just, they just don't grow anything ever at any time of the year. I don't know why. To my knowledge, there really hasn't been any poison applied out here. Certainly nothing that would persist that long. So I don't think it's that. So either it's a compaction issue, it stays too dry, the water can't penetrate, there's no seed there, something of the sort. So what I've decided to do is, as I collect the finished manure and the compost, so in this case, it's mostly going to be the rabbit compost. As I collect the rabbit compost, and I set up a system to collect it under their hutch. So it just falls through. A couple times a week, I go in there and I just kind of scoop out the old bedding and the hay, because everybody's got hay, because there's nests of baby rabbits right now. We'll get to that in a little bit. And I just collect all that, throw it in the wheelbarrow, and I just start patching holes. I find a bare spot. I throw a couple handfuls of that stuff on it. If you don't know, rabbit compost, it's high in, it's not high in nitrogen. It's got a nice carbon nitrogen balance because rabbits are herbivores. They only eat plant material. So their compost is not so rich in nitrogen that it causes issues for plants. So we can just throw that directly into your garden, directly onto the ground. The same goes for the sheep manure. The same goes for goat manure. So that's been a wonderful resource. So I'm excited about poop. That's just how it is around here. Poop really helps you close the cycle. We talk about closing the loop, closing the cycle. You have something that is a waste stream. Instead of exporting that waste stream off of your property, you find a way to hang on to it. You process it into something that can become soil, and then you put it where you need it the most. So I am starting, because my sheep operation is rapidly expanding. We're at 21 sheep and Primrose a donkey. That means I need my fields as productive as possible. And I'm starting to think about cover cropping, applying a cover crop seed sooner than maybe I originally planned, because of some people I talked to today. We'll jump over to that in a little bit. The chickens, I am not sure if the chickens are going to do what I want them to do. Because chickens don't listen and they don't care about what I think or my ideas. This is the first time I've had chickens that don't really scratch around or dig around. Normally with chickens, that is a behavior that you can harness and you can put it to work making compost. This is where you hear about the chicken tractor on steroids that Billy and William Bond have described over at Permapastures Farm. Joel Salatin gets into this. You may have heard of the carbonaceous diaper. That's where you use a deep bedding system in with your animal systems. You can do this with chickens, and they're just constantly working that material through, and before too long, you have a nice finished compost. Well, these chickens just really don't scratch. They kind of, they do a little bit. I mean, if they see a bug, they'll go for it. They'll kind of scratch and they'll kind of rough the ground a little bit, probably to see if something comes to the surface. But of all the chickens that I've had over the years, this is the first batch that just doesn't do it. So, and I believe I have a blend of black Australorps and some Araucanas, if I'm picking out my chicken breeds correctly. So I'm going to give them some more time, just in case they just don't have, they're just trying to get reset. It could be because of the way the lot that I pulled them off of, it was just bare ground and there wasn't a lot for them to scratch through. So they might have just kind of forgotten how to do that. So we'll see if we can revive that instinct in them. Pip and Ice, thank you for jumping in. Happy Friday to you as well. And so what I've decided to do, originally I was going to move these chickens around a lot. We built the portable shelter. I covered it in shade tarp. That is working well. I'm happy about that. I added some little caster wheels to two corners, and that helps a little bit too. But it's still kind of difficult to move. And I really want to be able to move these chickens around and have them work over the manure from the donkey and the sheep. You run the donkey and the sheep through. You follow with the chickens. It helps break your parasite cycle. But I just wasn't really happy with their lack of action. And we've got a fox out here again. Every time chickens come back, fox comes back too. No chickens, no fox. Funny how that works. So I decided to bring the chickens back closer to the cabin. So they are basically now up in the upper part of the front yard, adjacent to where I have all my carbon materials for making compost. So that's where all the wood chips and all the leaves and all the bag leaves are. So what I'm going to do instead is bring leaves and grass clippings from the mower bag and layer that up, just starting in one corner and working around in their containment area. And we're going to build up carbon that way. Then I am going to, when that is finished and ready, I am going to collect that compost and continue to apply it wherever it needs to be applied. So they're going to be closer. I think they're going to be safer. And this really is not any different than the way I used to keep chickens in the city, because they had a dedicated lot. They had to be in there. Couldn't have chickens running all over creation in the city. And I just always had enough, made sure I had enough carbon on hand that I was just always adding to their lot. So we were adding depth. And then I would, when I needed compost, I would get in there, I would shovel it out into a wheelbarrow, moved it where I needed to move it. I don't see why I can't still do that here. They're going to stay in their shelter. So this is a big shelter. This is like 15 by 24 or something like that. So they have a big shelter. They got plenty of room for the birds that are in there. 8 birds in there. But we need to, I need those chickens to do a little bit of work for me. So we're going to see how this goes. So just a little while ago, I moved them this morning. And then just a little while ago, I did basically like 3 layers. So a couple of bags of leaves, and a bag of grass clippings, and repeated that 3 more times. And then I took a little bit of their chicken feed, which I ferment, and scattered that on top to encourage them to get in there and go after it. We'll see how it goes. I'll keep you guys posted. I may also revisit an old urban homesteading technique. I got pretty good there for a while at feeding these animals in a lot of ways, in addition to store-bought food. Store-bought food, that's what I want to do the least of and do the most of everything else. Of course, nowadays I have no shortage of biomass to provide these chickens. That's not going to be a problem. But we used to do a thing I called the maggot bucket. This is a little bit controversial for a lot of reasons. I'm going to think about whether I can still pull this off here or not. Number one, I don't want to attract anything that could cause an issue for the chickens. But what I would do was to take a 5-gallon bucket with a really good fitting lid, drilled holes in the bottom, about a 3/8 inch hole, a bunch of them, 10, 15 holes. And then I would drop meat scraps, bones, anything of the meat variety left over, and we eat a lot of meat, so there's always plenty of that, into the bucket, capped it, and hung it up. As you might imagine, flies get in there, lay maggots, or lay larvae, which are the maggots. Maggots fall back out, and it's like this rainstorm, sort of chicken snacks. You can do similar systems with black soldier fly. You can do it with mealworms. Mealworms require conditions that are a little harder for me to achieve out here with no air conditioning. But maggots and black soldier flies are a high protein source of food for chickens. Some people have concerns about it getting pathogenic. I never had that issue. And what I actually noticed was when I did the maggot bucket, which was in the furthest corner of the yard back at the old homestead, at the corner of the alleyway. So not next to anybody else's backyard, sitting area, fire pit, anything like that. Far back corner at the alleyway. And the only thing going on in the alleyway was people digging through the garbage. When I started doing that maggot bucket, we rarely had flies bothering us. Like if we decided to eat dinner outside, I think it's because I gave a place to send all the flies as far away as possible. The fly, and it's not like I brought more flies in. They're already back there from everybody's garbage and neighborhood dogs ripping up garbage bags and it being a big stinky mess. So I was like, what if I took the problem of flies and turned it into the solution of attracting them to this bucket, feeding my chickens. And so we might do that again. I'm thinking about it. Between, the chickens and the rabbits, the poop is flowing. The poop must flow. And that's just going to speed up the process of getting this land back into a sense of some actual fertility through regenerative means, which is the whole kit and caboodle there. Quick note on the gardens and the food forest. Everything's going great. I've got a bunch of potatoes that came back up. Apparently I did not find them all last year, nor did they rot in the ground. So I've got potatoes popping everywhere in all these garden beds. I've put in a bunch of tomatoes, transplanted peppers, transplanted dill and basil, a bunch of other herbs. I've still got 3 or 4 trays that need to go out. I'm going to try to get those done tomorrow. And I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start another round of trays of like winter squashes and then a whole bunch more wildflowers. I have more installations on the calendar and I thought it would be cool. I might be able to get some flowers ready to go and not have to go to the nursery for them. Things like echinacea, black-eyed Susan, milkweed, things like that, perennials. So I'm so happy with how my little converted greenhouse turned out. That was one of my better moves, to turn that little shelter into a greenhouse. So the food forest, it looks like nothing got nipped. We've got little peaches coming in. I've got little cherries coming in. The apples and the pears are looking good. The berries are looking good. The new stuff that I added back in early spring in March, the Hazcaps, the hazelnut, all that's looking good. The only thing I'm not certain about coming back is the pawpaws. And they were tiny, tiny, tiny when I put them in. I mean, tiny. So the fella who gave them to me, he said, they're little, give it a shot. But I'll probably end up replacing those. They're so tiny, I don't even really want to try the scratch test on them to see if they're green underneath. They should have had something happening by now. That cold that we had could have really wrecked them being that small. So we'll see about that. So I think I will. Oh yeah, 2 other things. I picked up a compost tea bubbler aerator. So I have my worm composting system, which I can collect the castings and make them into a tea. But for what we really want to be doing around here, I need aerobic conditions, which means oxygen being infused. Compost tea that just sits will get anaerobic. You will have undesirable bacteria. So if you want a more fungal dominant based compost tea or extract, you need an aerator. So I picked up, I probably can show it here. I picked up this little guy. So I actually bought this on Amazon, but it's from a small company called wormbrew.com, made in the US. Look them up. They make a good product. It's very simple. Probably something I could have done myself, but sometimes it's just better to spend $30. So all this tubing is it's perforated, so it sends out bubbles. It doesn't come with an air pump, so you do need a little air pump. You can get one of those for about $15. So it's got a little filter, and then I attach here I drop this whole thing down into a 5-gallon bucket that I have filled with rainwater from the rain barrels and like a baggie, like a muslin bag of worm compost. And then I run the machine, I run the bubbler for about 24 hours. I have to time it because you need to use whatever you've made within about 6 hours of turning the oxygen off. So I made that for new plantings I put in on 3 different sites right now. And everything looks good. I mean, everything, leafed out well, looks healthy, all that good stuff. Didn't show any. I put this on stuff that was have been potted up for a long time, so was likely to experience a lot of transplanting stress, and it really didn't. Everything looked great. Nothing looked droopy. And I have to admit, this time I just kind of gave like 1 cup of solution to everything I planted. I didn't really engineer, how much per, square foot or whatever. I just gave everything a drink, and I gave it a drink to prior to actually watering. Yes, so I planted. In this case, this was mostly trees and shrubs. Planted, amended with some organic compost, and then gave a little drink of the compost tea, watered it in, mulched it. Everything looks great. I've been back on the site 2 weeks after planting, and everything looks great. So consider compost tea, and that's something if you want to stretch. So Magdalena, if you're still listening to this, if you want to stretch your compost, making a compost tea is a really good way to do it. And that's why I like to set up all of especially my urban and suburban consulting folks with worm systems, because you have to return nutrients somehow, especially if you're going with raised beds. When you're doing a raised bed that you assemble, you go buy all your inputs for it, you put everything in, you are starting out with basically an artificial environment. And over time, applying compost and cover cropping and interplanting, it will become a natural system, but it starts out kind of artificial and kind of engineered. So worm systems combined with making compost tea is a pretty fast way of getting that system operable and sustainable. So do the compost teas, do the compost, don't do fertilizers. Fertilizers you're going to build salt up in your soil, and you're going to you will ultimately wind up with weaker plants. Let's assume that you're growing plants out to a full cycle so that you can actually collect seed and actually work on having a resilient garden. You need plants that are pretty robust, that respond to nutrient and fungal networks within the soil, and don't depend on basically like a shot of steroids, which in my opinion is what fertilizer is. I would rather have a plant die from lack of nutrient, replace it, or find a better plant, or find a stronger plant and try again than kind of limp something along with, especially, expensive fertilizer. So that's just kind of my opinion on that. But that's, I've had enough years to kind of observe and reliably, that's what does well. Return nutrient to the soil. So yesterday, let me answer this question real quick before we go too far. Magdalena is asking, how often do you need to add the compost tea? Okay, for like your garden, for your like your vegetable garden, do it if you can. Do it right after you transplant something, or as soon as you can. After that, just observe. If you see signs of stress after a couple of weeks, maybe it's yellowing, maybe it looks like it's not getting enough water, then try a little bit more. And yeah, let me see about a link. to that aerator. Because I went to put a link up the other day, and they were sold out. But hopefully, that's just a small business doing the best they can. So Worm Brew. Actually, let's try this. Worm Brew. I don't know why my keyboard is being so slow. .com. Let's see if that gets us what we oh, Belinda Taylor, good to have you. Got a few of my former clients popping in. I'll get to the anaerobic versus aerobic here in a second. And yep. So I'm going to send you guys right to their website, and then you can probably plug it into stock. So there's a link for that. Okay. Aerobic versus anaerobic. Aerobic conditions mean that you have good oxygen carbon dioxide exchange going on. Hence, putting a bubbler, putting an aerator in there, stirring it. I mean, anything, splashing it. I've known people that made compost tea by just putting their buckets together, throw them in the back of the pickup truck, and aerating while driving around. Everything's just kind of splashing around. So anaerobic is a lack of oxygen. And when you have a lack of oxygen, you can get a lot of undesirable microbes, bacterial, heavy and bacterial critters that just don't, they're just not as beneficial in the garden environment. They have roles otherwise. So that's why if you want to make teas or extracts, you need some means of getting oxygen into the system. You can do it. I mean, there's nothing to stop you from doing this as part of a pond system if you've got some kind of or even like an aquarium style system. One of the things I used to do this would have been an aerobic system when we had the turtle inside. Every 3 or 4 months, his tank needs to be cleaned out. And of course, the bottom of it down in the rock is turtle poo. And so because he had his pump running all the time, we had a pretty aerobic system there. And I would drop a sump pump into his tank and pump his tank right into the gardens. Now I've had this turtle for a long time. He's always been a healthy turtle, so I've never had to worry about salmonella or whatever. But man, you would see the immediate response within a couple of days of those plants of receiving that kind of effluent coming out of the turtle tank. Anaerobic can provide. Let me put this up here. Anaerobic can provide minerals. Let me make sure I state this accurately. Yes, so there's still, and I would probably want to go back and revisit this in one of my books to make sure I'm stating this correctly. There's these things, it's never either or. We never want all of one thing or all of another. It's all about a balance, right? Most soils already tend towards being anaerobic because there's a lot of compaction, and the processes that need to happen to make soil more balanced is rare. So, but yes, anaerobic bacteria do have a role in helping plants uptake minerals. And Elaine Ingram is a lady who explains that stuff really well. And to be frank, I need to refresh my knowledge on that because it's been a minute since I really dug into it and looked at it. I think because I've been so focused out here with the issues as related to anaerobic systems and compaction that my response has been add carbon, add compost tea. add things that contain microorganisms to bring that back into balance. So, uh, yeah, I mean, the there's so many good courses out there on getting you really dialed in on the the super specifics of soil science. So yes, they all have a role. Um, I I'm a chart person. You guys have seen how I like to send diagrams and charts and stuff in your documents. Um, I need to find the chart. There is one out there somewhere. I may even have it in a book. Um, that breaks down the specifics of the bacteria and the fungi and how it all works together. Let's see. Um, what I'm thinking of might be in Gene Logston's book, The Gardener's Guide to Better Soil. This was kind of my introduction to all of this stuff. Another really good book is called Secrets of the Soil by Christopher Bird and a couple other people who are escaping me at the moment. Yeah, so Gene's book, so I am talking about The Gardener's Guide to Better Soil. Gene Logston was doing regenerative before it was a thing, or before a thing hardly anybody talked about. He gets into determining pH, your micronutrients, bacterial inoculants, rock minerals, soil amendments. I mean, green manure, which is like growing cover crops. Yeah, it's fantastic. Let me see if this chart is in here. Like I'm kind of thinking. 169. Let's see. So under bacterial inoculants, he says rhizobia are a form of soil bacteria capable of forming symbiotic nodules on the roots of leguminous, that's a good one, plants to help fix nitrogen. The nitrogen spurs the growth of the legume, and as the nodules reach maturity and disintegrate, fertilizes the soil. A further nitrogen boost can be attained by leaving the root systems in the soil to rot after the crop is harvested. That's not unlike using daikon radish. Yeah, so there's so much good soil science work going on out there. I mean, we've got people that are showing stuff on slides. You know, they're putting stuff under a microscope and they're able to show you what is what. If you want to get real technical about it, that's a thing. I personally, I just can't fit that into my study right now. There's so many people who are doing it well enough. I go find them and go from there. Hey Ben, and Ben says Matt Powers. Yeah, Matt Powers regenerative soil is recommended by a lot. That guy's on the ball too. So if you're definitely coming at things from a permaculture perspective, Matt Powers' work is wonderful. So bottom line, guys, get more diversity into your soil. Don't leave it bare. Number one. Don't leave it bare. That's why I'm going around patching all these bare spots with some kind of compost. Because it's basically free at this point. Animals are pooping for me. I collect it. I put it on there. Eventually, we'll get to cover cropping. So speaking of cover cropping, I was out at Lick Skillet Farm today. Lick Skillet Farm is a century farm, continuously farmed for over 100 years now. And the Miller family has been running that for that time. Wynn Miller, she is kind of a colleague and an associate. We have a lot of crossing paths and interest and whatnot. So she had a lot of people, over 40 people out there today for a discussion and demonstration of silvopasture. So silvopasture is the tactical use, I should say. It's putting trees in your pasture, which under kind of current farming dogma, commercial farming dogma, you don't do that. They don't want to put trees in the fields for a lot of reasons. The most common one being, with everything being mechanized, it's inconvenient to drive around a tree. So what we went over today, and it was a lot, what we went over today was what silvopasture can look like, how you can implement it, some of the best practices that Wynn has discovered personally as she's tried different methods of protecting the trees, what to plant, and the biggest one is why. So this is the thing to overcome with people. People envision this, big, maybe even, like square mile field, which if you get up into, soybean and corn country, feed corn country in Ohio and whatnot, everything's a square mile apart. So they've got these huge fields, literal squares, rectangles, whatever. And aside from the wind buffers that have been planted there, every, other field or so, there'll be a buffer. Windscreen, windbreak. It's very rare to just find trees out in the pasture because all the equipment has to go around them. Taking turns is less, quote, efficient. But Wynn gave a really good argument for why we need to consider combining trees with pasture. And it was actually, there was one that I was unaware of. In my mind, and my reason for doing it is I want to be able to add to the overall diversity of the land. So if I want more ecological diversity, I need more things growing here and probably less of certain things, which is the never ending, calorie pair, multiflora rose battle around here. But the shade provided by these trees is way more important than I realized. So in our area, and in the Southeast in general, most of our pastures contain some level of fescue, which is a non-native, undesirable grass for ruminants. They can eat it, but there is a toxin in it that actually causes animals to be more easily stressed in hot conditions. So if you can implement shade in your fields, and your animals can cool themselves. Because remember, we're talking about animals that are moved every day or every few days. We're talking about animals that are being rotated through a pasture system. They're not in an enclosure. They're not in a barn all the time. We're not talking about feedlots. We're talking about animals on grass moving around. If they have that shade available, you have a less stressed animal. A less stressed animal is less likely to get sick due to parasites. It's less likely to have issues with fertility or retaining a calf or a lamb for the appropriate amount of time, creating milk, all these things. For your animals that are turning into meat, you will have a better, healthier, more palatable meat product with an animal that has not been stressed. So shade is way more important than a lot of people have realized, especially here in the United States for a long, long time. And when she has gone all over Europe studying these systems as well, where it's common and they've been in use for hundreds, if not thousands of years, as long as agriculture has been around, silvopasture was just a thing. It was just normal. But the American way of doing things is it's hard for us to learn our lessons sometimes, you may say. So this gathering was great. So we had homestead people, we had large farmers, we had various agencies represented, businesses represented. So it was good. As a kind of general overview, one of the biggest issues with adding trees to your pasture is that you have to protect them from the animals that are going to be in that pasture. It's not always possible to plant the trees in such a way that you can fence the animals out. Obviously, if you want the trees to be able to access by the animals eventually, you got to put it where the animals are going to be. Most of the way now that we are protecting these trees is they're called tree tubes, and they're kind of like a corrugated plastic that come in various sizes, and you put in Wynn's case, she encases the tree in the tube. So let's talk about a little bare root planting. You plant it, maybe it's a foot tall. She goes ahead and she puts a tube that may be 5 feet tall over this little tree, stakes it, gets it situated. And there's also a sturdy fiberglass pole that goes through a little slot within the tube that keeps all of it anchored there. And then, at least in some places, she doesn't have this in every single paddock, but in one test paddock, there is a electrified fence that runs to each tree, and each tube has a little conductor wire on it. And so each of those tubes with the tree inside is hot, is electrified, which is how they fence all their animals anyhow. So all their animals are trained to an electric fence. So they know if they touch that wire, they get shocked and it hurts. So that's one of the best ways to contain animals and to move animals. So those trees are protected because depending on what kind of animal, that they can get damaged in all sorts of ways. So of course they can defoliate them by stripping off the leaves. The cows especially will rub on them. She said they will rub like the side of their neck, or if it's short enough, they'll straddle it and they'll rub their belly on it and then they'll just break it right off. I've seen Primrose do this. You know, she's of course much bigger than the sheep. I've watched her do this with some of the stuff that's in their current pasture, which is rather overgrown. But there's nothing in there that I don't care if she snaps it off, because it all needs all that. It's mostly calorie repair and privet, and all that needs to go away. So I do know that I will need to protect those. I will need to protect those trees. Pause a minute, guys. If you guys don't mind to wait a minute, I got a sheep out. Okay. Everything happens at once. Heard chickens fussing. I thought that fox might be out there, although I didn't see anything. And then I saw that we had a lamb out, and it just put itself back in, which tells me we need to, the new lambs have to be retrained to fence, a much hotter fence. So my weekend to-do list just got a little bit longer. Anyhow, trees in pasture. You tube them, you put through this stake, holds everything in place, and a nice and important little feature is a little cap on the, it's kind of a, not a cap, it's like a little piece of netting that is, it keeps the songbirds out. If you get little birds down this tube, they could die. So it's a strong enough netting that as the tree comes up, it can push it off. But in the meantime, it keeps the songbirds from getting caught in there and dying. Songbirds are an important part of your homestead, and we can't overlook those guys. So we did a farm tour, had some really good barbecue, networked with a lot of people, listened to a number of presentations. It was a really good use of time. Um, if you're in the East Tennessee area and you need regeneratively raised meat, poultry and beef and pig, Lick Skillet Farm is definitely high up on the list of recommendations. They have a farm store there too. You can just pull up and get what you want out of the freezer and pay for it right then and there. So that gave me more to think about, because one of the issues around here with adding trees is of course being able to protect them. Now, one thing I may be able to do is just use a little bit of, I keep when the poly wire for the sheep fence starts wearing out, I don't toss it. I keep it, because in most cases, even a fence that isn't energized, if they see the fence, they still avoid it. So I may be able to protect trees just doing like a little triangle of 3 posts and some poly wire. So that's an option when I add trees. And I also need to add them in such a way that it doesn't make it more difficult to do the paddocks. So I'm probably going to have to think about defining the size of the paddocks, because I have been changing it up in the over this past several months to, I graze tight strips, move more often. I graze larger areas, move a little less often. Depends on my schedule, depends on if I'm traveling and all that. So, but I think by wintertime, I'll be able to start putting some trees in. And then finally, in a lot of these areas, it's not going to be, I'm not going to say it's impossible to get water to them. It kind of depends. I mean, if I can get water to the sheep, I can get water to a tree in most cases. But that is, consideration is keeping everything watered. Magdalena, if you just put in 800 Lick Skillet Lane, it's off of Asheville Highway, Andrew Johnson Highway. It's east. You're going to be about 30 minutes east of downtown Knoxville. So, Lick Skillet Farm, pretty easy to find. You cross over some railroad tracks, turn onto a little farm road, and they're very responsive. It's a big place, so they're very responsive to emails and that sort of thing. Good folks. So yeah, so I'm definitely going to be getting more trees in, because these animals will need shade. There are going to be places where they don't have a lot of shade once we get hot. I do have areas where I can fence into the wood line a little bit and give them some shade. That is an improvement I've been able to make, but ultimately this is going to be worth our while. That is one of the nice things about, we're not really dependent upon mechanization out here. I mean, we do have the tractor, but it's not a big deal to, mow around a tree if we need to. It's not like we're doing, commodity crops or something like that. So that was my afternoon, well spent, and, met some new people, hung out with some people that we've done a number of projects together. So everybody's kind of in their spring rush right now. But I left feeling pretty energized about what we can do out here. And in the, I was going to touch on the pasture improvement a little bit too. Alex Miller over there, he's patriarch of the family, Wynn's dad. He said their improvement, the improvement in their fields came from cover cropping. They would sow a cool season cover crop, like an annual rye or a winter rye, and then or maybe some oats, and then they would sow a warm season cover crop like clover or legumes, something like that, or just kind of mix it up all together. And he said they healed their soil and their fields actually by cover cropping more so than compost application. So I guess it just depends on any number of factors. So we'll see how the funds are, how the business funds are as we get into fall. It's kind of, you start getting into fall around here, and I start to get a little bit stingy with the spending, because I know we're going to go into a slow season. So it's hard to justify a few $100s on seed. But we'll see. We'll see if we can. We'll see if we can make that happen. So, with perhaps with a spring and summer of compost application, I will be more confident about the ability of seed to take if I decide to cover crop in the over the winter time. So that's pretty much what I got for you guys. I feel like I threw a lot out there, but it's been a it's been a busy week, and I've got some catching up to do on Monday, trying to get a catch up day on the schedule after all the disruption and everything from last week. So thank you guys for hanging out and checking in with me and for your questions. And if you guys need anything, or if I can help you with anything coming up, you know how to find me. And until then, we'll catch you next time.